नमस्कार और बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद अर्नब जी और आईआईटी कानपुर की मैं एक बार फिर यहाँ पर खड़ा हूँ। भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा पर जो ऑब्लिगेटरी जोक है सर वो आपने मार दिया है, तो मैं सोच रहा था कि वहाँ से मैं स्टार्ट करूँगा, लेकिन वो अब नहीं हो सकता। तो व्हेन आई सी द ऑडियंस हियर, जब मैं ऑडियंस को देखता हूँ और स्कैटर्ड देखता हूँ तो एक कॉमन ट्रोप होता है ऐसे किसी भी लेक्चर में, कहते हैं कि आगे आ जाइए, पास सुनिए, आपको आवाज़ सुनाई देगी। परंतु हम वास्तु के विद्यार्थी हैं और वास्तु में अष्टदिक्पालक की कल्पना होती है। तो मैं आपकी कल्पना ऐसे कर रहा हूँ कि जो असामाजिक तत्व हैं वो ना आएँ और आप इन सारी दिशाओं में बैठकर आप इस जो लेक्चर सीरीज़ है उसकी रक्षा करेंगे, ऐसा सोचकर मैं यहाँ आरंभ करता हूँ। अर्नब जी ने आदेश दिया है अंग्रेजी में ही रखूँ, तो मैं वहाँ से ही आरंभ करूँगा। Who are we? Identity, culture and its relation with IKS. I am starting with issues which are deeply problematic in any other sphere, especially when you go to education and you talk about identity. It's very closely guarded. Only certain things are allowed to be said. Only certain identities are kosher, allowed, certain other identities, and that identity politics is not allowed or not considered good. So here, but it is very important to define what is our identity, what are the layers of our identity, and what is its relation to education and Indian knowledge system. So, when we talk about identity and culture, एक बात यह आती है कि what is its connection to education. But our education, if we are talking about shifting from what was said as universal knowledge system, which we are undergoing right now, shifting to Indian or Indic knowledge system, which means that we are talking about identity. Because if it was not a matter, not an issue of identity, we would not be talking of this adjective Indic. So what does it mean to be Indic is what we are trying to define here. अभी हमारे जो layers of identity है, we will reveal it one by one. First of all, these things you already know, the first 6 or 7 slides you all know, but we will start defining our identity through that, and we will also say कि उससे आगे हम क्या कर सकते हैं. There has been a great scholar, Bernard Lewis, who has written a lot on Middle East and the identity and politics of the culture of Middle East. He has defined 3 terms: country, nation, state. And I found his definition to be largely true, so I'll repeat it here and I'll also say where we differ. He says a country is defined by its geographical boundaries, a nation is defined by its ethnicity, and a state is defined by its government. So the only place where we disagree, where we Indians disagree with him, is the issue of nation and ethnicity, because we have a concept of cultural nationalism which is very different from ethnic nationalism. Because when you go to that identity, you will have many sub-nationalism, sub-identities within the country. So the usual thing is, this we have heard from our childhood. What is India? What are the geographical roots of India? So when I was a kid, monsoon, I used to think that monsoon is universal. That when it comes July, late June, July, August, it rains a lot, and it is a universal phenomenon. When I grew up, and when I got to know that it is not so, it is a rare thing to happen in India, that was a revelation, because wherever you are born, the conditions in which you are born, you think they are universal. For example, to take a joke, I come from Gwalior, and we have a very funny take on language, especially our local dialect, जो बुंदेलखंडी का चंबली dialect है. तो उसमें we had a lot of these chaat ठेलास, उनका नाम लिखा रहता था भैरंट चाट वाला. So what is this word, bharant? So I thought that was a natural word which means very, very sour, very tikha, or was all the tastes. When I got to Indore, I got to know that this is not a common word. This is very much a Gwaliorism. Bhayankar plus current ko they had done, and they started calling it bharant. So and it's very natural. If you go to Gwalior, people will use that word very naturally, very universally, thinking that this is how people talk. So the conditions in which we are born, we think that they are universal. But we also have to, in order to grow, we need to know how special we are in the sense India's geography is still very pristine and precious. So what are those markers? I'll repeat. All of you know this. We'll move on from that, but I'll repeat that. Once again, Indianism, हम सबके घर में अभी तो things have become standard, we have developed. We all had those stools on which only certain people could sit without falling down. The gates which would be closed only by certain people. मैं यहां से भी सर चेंज कर सकता हूं इफ देयर इज एन ऑल्टरनेटिव, है ना? थोड़ा ज्यादा हाईटेक हो गए, हाँ ठीक. So the sacred land of Bharatvarsh, the concept of Bharatvarsh is very geographically true. It's not just an idea. So when we talk the idea of India, it's not wrong to talk about idea of India, but that idea is very real. When we just say idea, we think that it is the imagination of some ideologue, some ideology. It is not that. So what are the grounds, geographical grounds of Bharatvarsh? So once again, Himalayas in the north, Sagar in the south, monsoon inside, icy winds outside. Abhi for these, when in these modern times, when we have gotten used to AC, we think Tibet, how good is Tibet that they don't have this heat and we have all this heat. Indian cities in North India going more than 44, 45. But no matter how hot even now today is, if nothing grows from the point of view of agriculture, that's not a good place to live in. So wherever the land is very bountiful, that is the place to live in. So this is very, very peculiar. Nowhere else it happens that there is an entire mountain range which blocks all the bad parts and keeps it north of India, keeps all the good parts, which is all the rains, inside India. And it has the triangular part, the Deccan Plateau and the southern India. So we have three oceans and all the, from two sides, all that monsoons building up and raining in that period of 2 to 3 months, which is enough to replenish all the groundwater levels and everything that we need in life. That is very, very peculiar. And that's why we always had a culture. We were a cultural nation because we were a geographical nation. Our roots of our culture and identity were in our geography. That is why when for the first time that identity breaks down, the problem of Pakistan and Bangladesh is so severe to us. Because for the first time, this geographical fort has been breached in a very great way. We have enemy nations right inside this border. And that's something which we have not found so far very good ways to deal with. So I have always been very interested in geography. So when I got for the first time I got the National Geographic Atlas, that huge atlas on which you can open and sit on it and it's so huge and look at all the lakes. And when you see the geography of US, many of you might have been to the US and you see the Great Lakes, huge lakes, and you see how bountiful they are in water, in all of these lakes and rivers. But actually what matters is how many small lakes you have in a country. Because the surface area then increases, usability of water then increases, and in that way India is still, after all the drying up of all our rivers becoming, as they say, nala, nadi, nala ban gaya. Uske baad bhi we are still so good because hamare jo lakes hain in every city, and this is not just natural, we had a natural tendency because every monsoon all those lakes and wo jo pokhar hain, wo sab bhar jate the. There was a great scholar, Anupam Mishra, Delhi mein rehte the, and he was a Gandhian scholar, he worked on the water bodies of India. And he said that he takes the evidence of so many villages and cities and towns in India which are named just on water bodies. I work in temples, and a temple would always be with a sacred grove and a sacred lake. It could not be without a lake. If you go to Gujarat, which is a semi-desert area, and many parts of it are almost complete desert, and you go to every small village, there is still a functioning lake from which you can use water for daily use. Maybe not for drinking anymore from all of them, but at least for bathing and all your uses, you can still take water from them. There is a temple, there is a lake, there is a sacred area around it which is still maintained. This is desert. This is true in Rajasthan also, because Rajasthan was drier, so they had the culture of, Gujarat also has the culture of Vav or Bauli. Alag-alag shabd hain, different words in different regions, but Vav and Bauli which are deeper so that evaporation is lesser, and the surface area which is even less, it is very deep, surface area is less, evaporation is less, and it has resulted in a great civilization. Rajasthan's population, if I am not wrong, is around 6-7 crores, 7 crores, or so is Gujarat. An area which is desert, 50% desert. Rajasthan is almost 50, Aravali, the west of Aravali, it's almost desert. It supporting a civilization of 7 crore means the natural bounty and the cultural replenishment of that natural bounty of that place. That even deserts are capable of giving that sort of civilization. So these were grounds for a very prosperous civilization, a very great civilization, which we did create. Now, how it leads to creation of identity and culture, and some very peculiar things about our civilization which never existed anywhere else, we will talk about. Now we will study the cultural roots of our identity. What is the sacred cosmology? Now, Sanskaran, Sanskriti, these are a binary of words, Sanskriti, Prakriti, Marg, Des, Lok, Shastra. Sanskriti is called as, हम बार बार अपने शास्त्रों में बात करते हैं, it is the Sanskaran of Prakriti. So whatever is there, naturally existing, the natural cosmic laws, we ritualize it. And by ritualizing, we make that a part of human lives. That is called culture. So there is a natural civilization that exists. Now how through culture we support it and do not destroy it? Because if you read until just 10 years ago, now they have become more cautious, Oxford, Cambridge and all of these dictionaries and thesauruses. If you had studied the definition of culture just 10 years ago, it was when man uses technology to control the forces of nature and bend them to man's will, that's culture. Now consider the violence of this definition. That's why they have this binary, man versus wild. That nature is always trying to destroy you, and if you see their literature also, if you study Irish literature or English literature, it's always nature versus man. One of the most famous literatures of the West, American, Ernest Hemingway, Old Man and the Sea, that's also the story of grit and survival of human being against the brutal, cruel nature. And that has been their binary. It's very high in their literature, it's very high in their civilization. But here, it was completely different. How do we define culture is how we support nature and natural identities, natural structures and institutions. That is culture, which does not destroy nature, but supports nature. So how do we do this? I'm sure by now, because of the buzz of IKS, you have heard this phrase, sacred cosmology also, at many places. We'll go a little deep into it. What is sacred cosmology? For example, if you go to Uttarakhand, if you go to Himachal, you don't even need to go to Uttarakhand. This is Kanpur. You go around Kanpur in any village, there will be some story of Ramayana or Mahabharata. कि यहाँ पर पांडव आए थे, एक तो पांडव हर जगह आए थे. No matter wherever you go, they were everywhere. So there is always a story of some इतिहास or Puran character or some story taking place at a certain place. And people respect that place and the natural institution, and maybe the forest, the lake, or whatever natural institution is left there, people respect it because this is a sacred place, this is a divine place. If we do something against it, the deities will get angry. Now this so-called quote-unquote superstitious belief goes into protecting those natural institutions. So what we have done is we have sanctified all of our land through the legends. So our cosmology, mythology is also not a wrong word. Now these days we have been talking arts is not mythology, arts is history. That's wrong. We have history, we also have mythology. Mythology is not a wrong word, their definition might be different, but if for the sake of having no confusion, let's use the word cosmology. Our stories, our Puranas, our Itihasas, what do? They sanctify whole of India, they sanctify all of our land with some legend. So when there is a legend of Ramayana, of Mahabharata, of Bhagavad Puran, connected to a certain piece of land, you tend to respect it more. If it's a deity, if a forest itself is considered a deity, you will be more afraid of cutting it. Because you don't just fear the municipal corporation who will punish you, you fear karmic fallout. That if I do this, it will be bad karma, I may incur it in this life, but also in the next life. So you keep sanctifying all of your land through that principle. This is the picture of Chitrakoot. Now if you go to Chitrakoot, now it's not very far from here, I guess, Kanpur, 5-6 hours or so. For the first time and at that time, I was no longer a communist, I had left that past behind. But even then when I got to Chitrakoot and I got really angry, I mean, everywhere I went, there was not a single ancient temple left. But that's not our fault, but I'm coming to it. They were they had vigrahas which were plaster of Paris, very obviously very badly done, aesthetically badly done, plaster of Paris vigrahas everywhere. And यहाँ राम जी चले थे and there were footprints, ये हनुमान जी का footprint है, ये राम जी का footprint है, यहाँ पर वो बैठे हैं, ये कंदमूल खाते थे, ये वाला आजकल पानकम which he would drink, this is what did Ram ji drink, and I was like, how do you know? And this is all wrong and this is just superstition. And at first I really got angry, but imagine what happened when you read the history. This place was so deeply destroyed so many times by invasions. The first layers of temples were gone, the second layers of temples were gone, the third layers of temples was gone, the society was completely destroyed. There was nothing left, only the kshetra was left, the mandir, the devalaya, many layers of it was gone, many generations met complete genocide, eliminated, wiped out. And yet, the memory of that sacred kshetra forced us, people from all over India, even from overseas India, to keep remembering that place. And they keep coming and they say for them, there is no difference between a story and reality. For them it's reality. When they said, Sri Ram ate this kandamul, for them it was true. For them, if somebody said Hanumanji came here, for them it was true. For them, here is Ram and Bharat and or some other Ram and Lakshman story or legend took place. For them, it was very true. And because of that, that sacred kshetra is still very much alive. So at first, you might think that this is not good, this is not aesthetic, this is superstitious. But how do we keep that memory alive? Now, had our sacred cosmology not been so deeply penetrated into the minds of all of us, without all of us being on paper literate, without being literate, 90% of society not being literate in Sanskrit, 80 to 85% at least, is still all of them knowing the legends so deeply and believing them so deeply that even after multiple layers of destruction, they maintained the sacred quality of the kshetra. If you go here in Chitrakoot, it's very pristine. You feel like अभी श्री राम और श्री लक्ष्मण जो हैं वो आएंगे यहाँ पर, और जो मंदाकिनी river that flows through, the pristine environment that is maintained is due to that sacred cosmology, that principle in Bharatvarsh which keeps repeating, which keeps creating identity and these cultural institutions. So geography is sanctified with legends, and legends are made real with geography. For example, this is one part. You visit all over India, visit all of these sacred places, you will find one or the other legend reflected in it. You read all our Puranas, read all our Itihasas, you will find there are some real geographical places reflected in those. So, anchoring the legends to geography, sanctifying geography through legends. This is the process through which this sacred culturing of the nation happens. So, how does this happen? So, if you go to Tamil Nadu today, Kanchipuram I did not know because the pronunciation is very different, and I did not even read it in a book until some Malayali pronounced Jhansi for me. So, it was very peculiar, Jhansi. So, then he said, then Kanchi, how do they call Kashi is, Kanchipuram is named after Kashi. Madurai is nothing but Mathura in their pronunciation. And you see Ayodhya, many Ayodhyas. So if you go to Thailand today, before the Burmese destroyed the capital around 150 years ago or so, 150 or 200 years ago, their capital used to be Ayutthaya, which is Ayodhya. If you go to the 10th largest river in the world and one of the largest in Southeast Asia, Mekong, it is simply an upper branch of Ma Ganga. The capital of one of the most Islamic states of the world, Brunei, it is Bandar Sri Bhagwan, which is Hanuman. The capital of the easternmost province of Indonesia, which is Irian Jaya, is Jaipur. Thailand used to be, before they named it on the royal dynasty, which was very much resented, it was Siam. Champa was North Vietnam. And so there are many examples. Recently I'm coming from Meghalaya, And Garo Hills, it's divided into three main communities, Garos, Khasis and Jantiyas. So Garos had more connection with Assam and Bengal. So their language, which is Tibeto-Burman, means very different from us. It is like these Cynic languages. So not a single word you will find similar to us. And yet it has taken so much from our languages. Every second village is named as Giri. And there is Shyamgiri. So now they write it S-I-A-M-G-R-E, Shyamgre. And they also pronounce it a little differently, but it is Shyamgiri, Ramgiri. There are many giris. If you'll go on road, I recorded some videos. In a video of 5 minutes, you will find 12 to 15 giris. So many of our places sanctified like that. The foothills of Meghalaya, if you see the geography, Bengal did not have a stone. It's a alluvial plain, so it doesn't have a stone, and Assam also had little stone. Meghalaya and the foothills of Meghalaya were the workshop of creating sculptors in India, in that part. They created a lot of vigrahas, and now in archaeological excavations, they are finding a bed of Shivlingams, 100 Shivlingams, 500 Shivlingams, which are created, which were made there. Maybe they never got the chance to, and before that civilization fell, they never got anywhere. So this is how the culturing takes place. And there are many Ayodhyas. Also, the tourist circuits of India are mimicked at a level. Amrit will come and he will talk about, he always talks about fractals. And our cosmology is also reflected in a fractal manner over and over again. For example, we know all the great, we will not call it original, but the great Char Dhams, which is Badrinath, Dwarka, Jagannath Puri, and of course, Rameshwaram. Now, if you go to Uttarakhand, they have their own concept of Char Dhams. Kedarnath, Badrinath, Gangotri and Yamunotri. But that principle keeps playing on ever and ever smaller scales. I come from Gwalior. There is a district just near it, Murena. In Murena, there is a concept of Char Dham. So there are 4 temples and one temple is such, if you stand there, you can see the places of 3 temples at the same time. So this binding of the whole country into one sutra, along with keeping diversity, and we'll keep coming back to this principle of unity and diversity again. Last time also when I was here, we talked about unity and diversity. But this principle keeps getting repeated. Along with keeping the diversity, they took care that there also must be sutras of uniting these diverse area in one. And Jatra or Yatra is one of the greatest, Tirtha Yatra is one of the greatest sources of uniting all the places that you have in one sutra. And this is repeated at all scales. All of India, connected with the concept of Char Dhams and then Kumbh Melas and Shakti Peethams and Bara Jyotirlingams, but then it repeats at ever a smaller scale. Even district is a very modern contemporary concept and idea and a unit, but I am saying that on ever a smaller scale, even a small geographical region like the Bihars of Chambal, they have the concept of Char Dham. And in that, the diversity of those Char Dhams is, you can see. One of them is a local sadhu who just sat there, meditated for a very long time, became very famous, attained mukti, moksha, and he became famous. So one of them is Shyamdev Baba. This picture that you see is, he was seen later as the avatar of Shiva. But he was a jnani who sat there, meditated, and his fame spread. He was not interested, but the villagers around, they kept coming to him and he became very famous. Now another one is a very regular temple of Ma Shakti, Ma Parvati. One is called Devvan. Now here there is no temple. Huge dense jungle infested with the dacoits of Chambal. Huge dense jungle, you drive into it, trek hai, you drive a motorcycle into it, suddenly you come upon a copse, an open area, because this is in certain places in jungle, in forest, this is not artificial or man-made. And this is how deeply natural our culture is, or at least was. That even in jungles, we did not always create those open spaces. Jungle has a mechanism, some places, dense jungle just opens up in an area. A small area like this, as small as this auditorium, where there are no trees. Some small hubs maybe, but no trees. That place is considered extremely auspicious. And that is declared as Dev Van because it is thought of as Brahma Kshetra. Inside that forest, you are standing in an open space which is open to all the elements, and all around there are forests, there is forest and there are trees. That is considered very sacred. That concept is in every place of India. Nandita Krishna ji has written a very good book on sacred plants and sacred animals of India, and she mentions that every single language of India has the concept of Dev Van. Maybe some may correct me, in Tamil or Malayalam it is called Kavu or some word like that. In different areas, Devan, Devan, as a different words हैं which are considered as that. So in Morena, one of the Char Dhams is this open area where there is no constructed temple, where it is just like some Shinto Japanese temples where it is open to the elements. There are some pieces, some Shivlingams may be put there, but they are open to nature. And you would have heard this all your life. ये यहाँ की गंगा है. This is the Ganga. Godavari is considered Ganga of the South, then Kaveri also is considered Ganga of the South. Every small place will have, this is the Ganga here. And you get surprised by how much this concept seeps down into our psyche. And you cannot read this in books. Because when you go to these places and you really meet people, really meet these societies, I had a friend who lived deep in the rural areas of Morena. So when his father passed away, and he said, when I went there, he said he's going to Ganga, माँ गंगा, गंगा जी मैं जा रहा हूँ और अस्थियाँ जब सिराने का समय आया वहाँ सिरा रहा हूँ. So और शाम को वापस आ जाएंगे. Okay. Yeah, thank you. So he said शाम को वापस आ जाएंगे. So I said, how is it possible you will go to Ganga ji and then come back? बोले यहीं तो हैं. And for him, he did not even think it to clarify that he's calling the local river there is Ganga. That's how deeply this idea is embedded in our psyche. For us, it is Ganga. For us, the local river is Ganga. So not only one river is sacred, we sanctify more rivers at ever smaller levels with that same concept. Mani Mahesh Kailash. So I went to, all of you should go to beautiful, we also did an Anveshi in Chamba Anveshi, one of the most beautiful places that you will ever find in India. The district is very naturally a district because it is surrounded by mountains on all sides. The valley is Chamba, valley and mountains there is Chamba, where all the towns of Chamba are there. So you have to climb to Dalhousie, which is a hill station which everyone goes to. After that you have to descend. In the valley there is Chamba. And from the other end of the valley is Bharmor, and the entire valley is connected in the legend of Shiva. And there are stories which keep repeating at every level. So I've written on it, there are many stories, but I was so surprised to know every single temple, when the Chamba Yatra, Bharmor Jatra happens, every single temple takes out a Yatra to Bharmor. So every family contributes in that Jatra, and that roads are blocked. You have to walk for 30-40 kilometers, and then you go, and all of this Jatra happens. So I was there, and there is Mani Mahesh Kailash in Chamba district. So there are many Kailashas, just like there are many Gangas. So there is Mani Mahesh Kailash there. So at that time I was not aware that there is a Kailash here. So I was in my car, and my driver suddenly said, sir, after the next bend we will see Kailash. I say, Kailash, have we gone that far? I had been near China. So I asked him a question which in his psyche and according to his culture was extremely stupid. So I asked, the original Kailash, Asli Kailash. And he looked at me and said, what an idiot. I mean, after 2 minutes of adjusting to my question, he said, Asli or Nakli kya hota hai? Kailash, Kailash hai. And it was not that he was informationally unaware that there is great Kailash across the border in Tibet. He was not unaware of it. But yet, for us, one and many, this doesn't create a problem. I have gone to many places where Shabri fed berries to Sri Rama. Every one of them believe, every one of them not believe. They know this is the place where it happened. All the while knowing, if you tell them that place is there also, believe yes. And in their mind, there is no contradiction. This is the Hindu psyche. This is the Indic psyche, how it is created. and every yatra is a pradakshina of cosmos. So the concept of pradakshina is this, that you go around the entire cosmos. Our way is not to understand, I am not saying our way is not that, but our way of ultimate jnana is not to study by deconstructing universe and life into its smaller pieces and studying every small piece. Our way is to understand the central principle that governs it all. So we all know this famous story of Ganpati and Kartikeya, where there was a competition. And what happened in that competition? They were asked to go around the universe for 108 times. Kartikeya, being a good scientist in what we do science in today's meaning, he really went around the universe and he was capable of that. So he is not insulted. He really goes around the universe 108 times, and he is only a little slower than Ganpati ji. So he comes, I am not aware of how many hours passed after Ganpati completed the 108 pradakshinas and then Kartikeya came, but in the story he comes just a little later. But what does Ganpati do? He goes around his parents saying that aap hi mere bhagwan hai. Now it seems like lazy and easy excuse also, but what is the principle that is being conveyed here? The principle is that what is the seed of a problem? The Indic civilization to look for the seed, root cause of a problem, seed, and the very essence, very meaning of anything, any pursuit. And so he goes around, the Ganpati is someone who goes around the principle, and Kartikeya is someone who goes around the manifestation, and we have got both covered. So that's why that scientific methodology which today exists is not outside our realm. It is not something which we have to oppose. It is part of our civilization, yes, but we also have other pursuits. And because Shiva and Parvati are the cause of the universe in, if you say one parampara, then Kashmir Shav parampara or Shav parampara and Shakta parampara, but in an essence they are the symbol of the life itself, symbol of Gyan itself, and that's why doing pradakshina means doing pradakshina of self. Or there is another symbol of it. In temples, when you go around the temple, around the Garbhagriha and Pradakshina, sometimes when the priest, when the archak invokes things, he says, stand at your place and go around. So you just rotate on your own axis. So this is taking Pradakshina of your own self, which is the highermost self, which is not this self, which is the highermost self. And so in a way, every Pradakshina is made to be done like this. I will destroy every one of your search pointers. So these were the boundaries of our geographical boundaries, then the cultural boundaries, and the most critical element of this was the language, which was the language of the gods, language of the rishis, language in which we communicated through all the different and diverse cultures, which is Sanskrit. I will not go, far from an expert of Sanskrit, I understand a little, I do not even know it well, but I know some principles. So we will discuss through that and we will move on. There is the concept of, in our Shastras, we have the concept of 4 level of Vak. The speech has 4 level, Para, Pashanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari. It is said that the origin of language is there in the highest level, which is Para, which is not expressible in words. I will not go deep into it, but language becomes expressible only at the level of Vaikhari. When it comes out through our vocal cords as human voice, then it is Vaikhari even if it is Sanskrit. It becomes Vaikhari. So that's why it is said that the real truth cannot be described, because real truth is only possible to describe in Para, and in Para there are no words, not even images. Para is considered equivalent of Brahma or Parashiv or Mahavishnu. So that it is not, truth is not expressible in human language, you only have to experience it, you cannot write it in the book. Otherwise we would have also written books and distributed to every single person, and all of them would be Gyanis, but that is not true. We have never said that this can happen, and this is the reason. So Sanskrit is also a creation in Vaikhari, but it is considered the closest approximation to reality. So, see, we were a wonderful civilization because the Buddhist civilization, they also said truth is inexpressible, but most of the times they left it at that. The Sanatan principle, what does it do? On one hand it says it is inexpressible, yes, that is true, But we'll try very, very hard to express it as much as possible in all of human languages and metaphors as far as it is possible. So Sanskrit is that language in which Jnanis and Rishis, in flights of meditation, in the higher states of consciousness, they develop insights onto the world about various affairs of life in the world, and they express it in Sanskrit. This is the principle, that's why it is called Dev Bhasha, because it is thought of descending from above and not a human creation. When you are deep in meditation, these structural grammatical structures, the roots of these words, they are seen by rishis, and that's how the language is created. This is how we maintain in our civilization. But that's why the Sanskrit has done a wonderful thing to our languages. Had there been any other culture other than ours, and any other language other than Sanskrit, by far it would have destroyed almost every other language culture in India, which very sadly, we think of it as a nationalist move. But Hindi is in the process of doing. Hindi and English both are in the process of doing, destroying the linguistic diversity of India. So that those linguistic resentments in other states are not without any reason. Of course, the bad elements in society exploit it for their own benefit, anti-national benefit, that's a different story. But the process in which English and Hindi, what they are doing to other languages, we would have done had Sanskrit not been there. So what does Sanskrit do? Sanskrit upholds the local regional Kshatriya languages, Kshatriya bhashas, but elevates them by providing them with the higher vocabulary of darshana. So for example, Advaita Vedanta, Kashmir Shav Darshan, all of the higher philosophy, the words that are created in Sanskrit, they are loaned to other languages, and that's how they are elevated to classical status. So if you see, when the classical era, Gupta era was over, what happened is that in the south, north, that process got aborted because of the foreign invasions that happened later on, that's another story. But in south what happened, after the classical era of Sanskrit was over, Kannada, Telugu, Tamil, even before that was at that level, but Telugu, Kannada and Malayalam, they got raised to classical, the level of classical languages. How did they do it? They started creating great literature and great darshana and poetry by using the core ideas and words which were already there in Sanskrit. But they did not change their own language. So for example, if you go in the south, in daily life, the division is this, mostly the Sanskrit originating words are those which pertain to higher meaning, higher darshan, higher philosophy. But every other words, they were not changed, they stay as it is. So local languages were elevated, they were not destroyed. This is the principle in which a central language actually makes the regional languages richer and regional cultures richer. There is a great example of Raj Tarangini. Kalhan's Raj Tarangini is the story of Kashmir, we all know that. It's written in Sanskrit. So according to Western, and this is a great binary in the West. What is the binary? There is great violence between a classical language like Latin and the local vernacular, so-called vernacular languages like French, English, Spanish. And they say either the classical languages tries to destroy all the regional languages, or when the regional languages rise, the great culture falls. But here you see the exact opposite of happening. Here a classical language like Sanskrit is writing the story of a local kshetra and their own glory. One professor, I think she's from JNU or Shonaleka College, JNU or DU. She has written a wonderful work, The Making of Early Kashmir, destroying all the binaries of a Western mind by researching on Raj Tarangini. That here a classical language is telling the glory of a local state, of a local kshetra. And this principle, largely I will not go deep into it, in our culture, in those who come from arts, they know it more, is called as Margiya and Desi. So broadly, there is the idea, there is a central highway, which is the Vedic, Sanskrit, Margiya highway. And then there is Des, there is country. And these two are not opposite to each other. These two are not conflicting with each other and yet are complementary of each other. They too nourish each other. To the point where Kumar Swami indicates in his works, the great Ananda Kumar Swami, he says that when India was undergoing through foreign invasions and the classical languages and Shastra were destroyed, Shastra were burned, Brahmins were killed, all the temples were destroyed, all the agraharams were destroyed. At that time, and he says in almost, I am paraphrasing, but he says that Shastra flees and takes refuge in Loka. And so what used to be Shastra, now you can actually find more in Loka, because there is where it went and hid when the invasions were going on. It's a beautiful thought that how our Lok Parampara, our Desi Parampara, was not against the Margi Parampara, our Margi Parampara was not against Desi Parampara. So when one comes under attack, the other preserves. Currently, the opposite is happening. What is happening? Under the onslaught of the universal global culture, Insta, all of these social media, the local culture is disappearing. The dialects, the local things. At some places they are getting some power also, but mostly there is great homogenization. But our Shastras, our Lok, our central Sanskriti is capable of preserving the signs of those regional variations and recreating them when the time so appears. So this is how our binaries functioned. Sanskrit and Prakrit were also like that. Local languages and Sanskrit, just like I said, how it elevated regional languages, and this is how the Sambandha went. So what makes us one? Now we come to the central question of identity. See, defining identity and definition by their very nature, they include something and they exclude something. You cannot have a definition which does not have any boundary. It is impossible. So it obviously will include something, obviously will exclude something. Now does that mean that there is no way to breach that boundary and come inside? Of course there are ways. But if you don't define who you are, then there is no way, there is no definition, there is no identity. So that identity in our country, in this civilization, is the identity of Sanatan Dharma. This is how we define. We are ready to accept each and every one if they do not violate the central, universal precepts of concepts of Sanatan Dharma. And here are some of the most universal on which there is a very broad agreement. First, there is a concept. I think in the last time when I went deep into this, so I will not go deep into this. Rit, Rin and Dharma. So Rit is the cosmic principles which are invisible to us and yet they exist. For example, when we are born, there are certain genetic processes according to which our body grows, our mind grows. So these are cosmic principles which are in motion. We cannot take care of our own when we are born. Our parents and society take care of it. So these are the cosmic principles, natural cultural principles which keep moving. That creates a rin on us. So this is a beautiful concept, because this I will focus here once again. Because if you see that it is your right to be born and to have all of these resources, then you will destroy anything that you can afford to. But here the concept is different. Concept is exactly opposite. That just by living, just by being born, a debt is created on you. And you have to repay that debt. An entire Hindu Indic way of life is based on this theory of debt, for the better want of a word, but we will not stop because English does not have better words. That is okay. We can call Rin as that and move on. So Rin is that concept. To do that, to repay that debt is Dharma. Dharma has many definitions like this, but to repay here for our purposes, to repay the debt is on us for existing. That is called as Dharma. Our worldview, our Kartavya, the world of our Kartavya is defined through that principle, this principle of Rit, Rin and Dharma. Another central concept is Karma and Punarjanma. So, no matter wherever you go, and in that, Buddhism and Jainism are also deeply Indic. Why? Because the Siddhant of Karma and Punarjanma is common across all three of these cultures, Hindu, Jain and Bauddha. No matter wherever you go, except some fringe cultures which were accepted, we were very tolerant, so we accepted them. For example, people keep giving the example of Charvakas, and they say they also existed. Of course they existed, there will always be people like that. For example, my own very Sagi Bua, when she was young, around 24, 25, and she was married early, and वो बचपन से she was very famous, बहुत लालची थी. तो बीच में क्या हुआ, उस समय कुछ ऐसा, there was a rumor, some satellite ऐसा था कि वो गिरने वाला है. अब उस समय बिफोर द इंटरनेट एंड ऑल पीपल वर नॉट वाइज इनफ, स्काई हाँ वो गिरने वाला है, गिरने वाला। तो उन्होंने उधार लेना चालू कर दिया, दूध वाले से उधार, राशन वाले से उधार। बोले कि जब मरना ही है तो इसको पे क्यों करना है, तो उधारी में मरेंगे। सो हाँ, प्रैक्टिसिंग चारवाका। सो ऐसे लोग बहुत मेरे परिवार में हैं। सो शी वॉज दैट कि क्या करना। अब उनको ये नहीं समझ में आया कि अगर मरने ही वाले हैं तो पैसा जोड़ के भी क्या होगा, फिर भी वो भी तो एक ही बात है। बट नो, नेचर आर प्रोपेंसिटीज दे रूल अस। सो खूब उधार लिया, फिर नहीं हुआ तो वो बहुत सी बिकर्ड ऑल्सो कि ये क्या गलत इन्फॉर्मेशन फैला देते हैं। शी हैड टू टेक लोन्स टू पे बैक। सो दीज चारवाकास ऑलवेज एग्जिस्ट, बट ब्रॉडली our sampradayas, our kshetras, our philosophies, our darshanas agree on karma and punarjan, and without this you cannot talk of anything. जब लोग कहते हैं we shy in talking about this कि अरे ये तो unscientific principle है, but these are axiomatic truths. That's why I call them not beliefs but axiomatic truths. Axioms are unprovable but they exist. आप प्रूव नहीं कर सकते but वो exist करते हैं. Science also exists on that. So they are not beliefs, they are not scientific truths also, they are axiomatic truths on which entire Hindu Indic civilization rests upon. Karma and punarjanam is that. You cannot go beyond that. So this is because all the idea of moksha is what? Moksha is a release from what? Janma maran ke bandhan se. So if there is no moksha, then there is no concept of karma and punarjan. Or karma and punarjan nahi hai, so entire Indic ethics collapses. Because entire Indic ethical concept relies on, we will have multiple births up, there is no free lunch in the universe, you cannot steal money from others, skylab गिर रहा है तो भी आप in next life you will have to pay back all of that debt in one way or the other. So this has created a very broad culture of morality and ethics. That's why we don't have normative ethics. So people abhi, there are papers in Indian universities Hindu ethics. Some scholars disagree. There is no such thing as that. Because Hindu ethics is very conditional, dependent upon the principle of dharma. It is contextual, it is always dependent upon the contingencies of time and space, and the universal principle is dharma based in karma and punarjanma. That everything has to be sustainable in the longest run through multiple lives and multiple births. So normative ethics nahi, because normative ethics becomes the book that dictates कि in any condition this is the law that will be followed. वैसा नहीं. This is the principle which works. This is the meaning, for example, when Dr. Kapil Kapoor ji says we had one word unwritten constitution, dharma. This is that principle which operates when the condition comes, and it is not a universal sentence that you have to follow. And that's why this is the theory of Atma and Brahma. So all of Hindu sects, in this we are different from Buddhists and Jains, because some of the most esoteric texts inside Hindu dharma, like there is Avdhut Gita and Ashtavakra Gita, they are very, they deny everything, Varna, Jati, ये सब deny कर देते हैं. But they also do not deny Atma and Brahma. Why do they not deny? They say Atma, individual, all of us have our basic nature, we are truly Atma, which is the lower self. When you realize the truest nature of Atma, that is Brahma, वो हम पहले बातचीत कर चुके हैं. Why don't they deny? Because if you deny these props, these are all props. Atma, Brahma are also props to have the ultimate experience. But if you deny the prop, there is no means of progressing from the lower level to high level. So this is common. The idea of karma and punarjan, the phenomenology of rit, rin, dharma, and the concepts of Atma and Brahma. And based on this, the Indic worldview is created. The worldview of Pancha Rinas. जो अभी हमने ऋण की बात की कि 5 हमारे ऊपर ऋण है, देव ऋण है, ऋषि ऋण है, पितृ ऋण है, मनुष्य ऋण है और भूत ऋण है. सो आवर नेचर, सबसे पहले तो देव, डीटीज दैट एग्जिस्ट, पावर्स दैट एग्जिस्ट, उनका ऋण हमारे ऊपर है. उसके बाद ऋषि, बिकॉज वी आर अ नॉलेज सिविलाइजेशन. हम विश्वगुरु की बात करते हैं. द ओनली वे वी कैन बी विश्वगुरु इज बीइंग द नॉलेज लीडर्स ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. And that is why हमारे यहाँ ऋषि परंपरा को, गुरु परंपरा को इतना महत्व दिया है. तो सेकंड इज ऋषिज, थर्ड इज पितृ. वी आर ऑल्सो एंसेस्टर वर्शिपिंग. जैसे द वेस्टर्न माइंड इज वेरी नैरो. इट सीज एज सम कल्चर्स एज ये एनिमिस्टिक हैं, ये एंसेस्टर वर्शिपिंग हैं और ये हिंदू हैं, विच इज absurd to our ears because we also worship our ancestors. उनका ऋण है, they have sacrificed a lot. First of all, physically we would not be here if our ancestors would not have taken the prana of begetting children and then continuing the generations until us. So very simple biological reason, but beyond that, sustaining a civilization which is livable, creating a culture, maintaining that culture which is livable, that creates a ऋण on us. And then there is Manushya ऋण. So the people who are around you, not just your mother and father, not just your extended family, but the larger society also makes the society livable for us. For example, if my son, I trust the school bus to take my son in the bus to school, and I trust that he will be taken care of, I have a trust with society. So that is, this society is creating a ऋण on me, that it is creating a place which is safe for my kid to go, to kid to live, and that is why Manushya ऋण. And then there is Bhut ऋण, very deep. Nature, Bhut is what here? Bhut is nature, and all the forces of nature, they also create a ऋण on us. Because without that, of course, we would not exist. So this is the Kartavya Bodh. That's why, if you see the classical Hindu worldview, ये बोला जाता है, what do you have to do to your father, to your mother, to your son, to your wife, बुआ के लिए क्या करना है, और ये कर्तव्य बोध से पूरा बंधा हुआ है. So different kinds of relationship across different levels. And the broad concept of, which keeps repeating, the concept of Srishti, Sthiti and Lay. There is creation, there is maintaining, nourishing that creation, and also the principle of dissolution, because without the principle of dissolution, growth and creativity becomes cancerous. The West is not lacking in creativity at all. They are far more creative than us at this stage, very, very frankly. That's why they create, they produce so much. But they have no responsibility behind that creation. That after I create this product, which is useful now, what will it do in society? For example, refrigerators are very, very useful to us. But what did they ultimately do? अभी तो वो problem थोड़ा intermittently has been solved. But जो ozone layer का जो problem हुआ, so all of that release, they did not think about that what will this chemical, after corona, we are pumping so much of sanitizer in all of our atmosphere. With no thought, what will it do 10 years, 20 years later? The reason vultures disappeared from North India, all of India, was mostly because of DDT and other such chemicals, because it destroyed their ability to, they had a compound in their urine, and they had the habit of, they would stand and urinate on their own feet. So the fungus that generally they suffer from in their feet, that fungus would get destroyed by their own urine. That was the process. Now this chemical, what did it do? It destroyed the capability in that urine to cure that fungus, and only because of that vultures disappeared. Dogs today are becoming wolf-like because the scavenging birds are gone. Vultures ke disappearance se dogs in the streets are now hunting. You can see, I have seen many times, they hunt pigeons, and now they are even going after small kids and small children. They are redeveloping their wolf-like features because खून लग गया है, blood आ गया है उनको, hunting आ गई है, because the vultures are gone. Earlier vultures were so, उनका जो इंद्रियां थी, they were so, senses were so sharp. Whenever someone died, vultures would always be there. My friends used to tell me, whenever a maveshi, a buffalo would die, within 5 hours, picked clean to the bone, like somebody had cleaned it with acid in a lab and put the skeleton there. 5 to 6 hours. This would happen to a buffalo. Abhi they say they have to inform the municipal corporation, pick up this corpse, otherwise it is rotting. Dogs are taking away some, but it is rotting like that. So what are the consequences of our actions? If you do not have this principle in mind of laya, of dissolution, then that becomes problematic, that creation becomes cancerous, that creativity becomes cancerous. That is a great problem in the West, and we will also discuss institution, that how that is actually one of the greatest problem that is there. Our civilization offers a solution. For example, the West and the non-traditional society do not have a mechanism. When an emergency comes, they throw up an institution which is useful in that emergency. But when that emergency is over, how to withdraw that institution, they do not know. And the principle, the institution which was very helpful in the emergency, becomes a predator in times of non-emergency. For example, in corona, we were all looking for hospital beds, right? Oxygen cylinders. So people said no, and because people have all the stupid demands, no, we should have like all of our, not a thing, we should have those goals that nobody should go without a bed in a hospital. Arey bhapre. Do you have 140 crore beds? Do you have the capacity to create 140 crore beds? And by any miracle, suppose you have a staff imported from Mars who will cater to all 140 crores in your hospital beds. Suppose even if we achieve that, what will happen after that epidemic is over? What will those doctors do? What will those nurses do? What will those hospitals do? What will those pharmaceutical companies do? When that business and startup has expanded and become a huge institution, they will keep looking for more and more epidemics. They will create some so that they are in business. It's in their benefit so that hospitals are always full. When you bring it into market, this is the principle that happens. So they do not have the principle of lie. Now there is a very beautiful example of lie in Indian society which we all witnessed just a few days ago, which we will discuss at last of this lecture. And this principle is named by very different names. So three levels of reality are also called as Adi Bhautik, the physical, Adi Daivik and Adhyatmik. So the level of deities and the level even beyond deities, which is Adhyatmik. And same principle, the three trinity of our gods in many ways, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh is that. Brahma is the creator god, Vishnu पालनहार हैं और शिव लय करते हैं. So that principle is there and we worship the god जो लय भी करते हैं. ऐसा नहीं कि केवल हम नरिश और क्रिएट करने वाले को करते हैं. So very different concept from western or biblical gods is there the god is creator god. हमारे यहाँ creator god is one of them and also not one of the most important ones because there are very few temples to Brahma. Not one, there are many but very few temples to Brahma. So we are coming to the end of our lecture. What does it mean, culture and identity to IKS? Because Indian knowledge system, when you propound, it has to be useful in the sense that it has to make meaning in our lives, in our jobs, in our careers, in what we do, in the institutions that we create, in the institutions that we run. So what are the basic principles? First of all, we have a harmony between multiple identities. Why? Because we have the concept of individual, we have the concept of family, we have the concept of clan, we have the concept of jati and then other sampradaya, samuday, desh and then dharma. And all of these identities can coexist with each other, they are not fighting with each other. जो मैंने अभी vernacular और मार्गी देसी का जो principle आपको बताया, what happens is there world over huge violence has happened because of that. Europe में great wars have been fought just on the basis of languages only. Genocides have happened. ये identity wars हैं. Else has also written a book, Culture Wars and Identity Wars, and he keeps saying, he reiterates that principle, that the way cultural identity conflicts in India are solved, the West cannot even think of even today. For example, for us also, abortion was considered very bad at one point of time. But then situation became so, that population became so big, that it became necessary. First of all, it was necessary to spread information that you should limit your population. But after that, it was never considered a great issue कि abortion करना चाहिए या नहीं. It was dependent on the situation. If the mother is in danger, of course, the kid is not important at that point. The mother is more important, and we never had to fight a lot on those issues. The West is still fighting on those issues. Whether it is good, because they attach values with goodness with certain acts itself कि abortion सही है या गलत है. But हम कहेंगे it can be right in one context and wrong in another context. So these culture wars, identity wars are very easily resolved. Conflicts are very easily resolved in India because we have this structure of multiple identities coexisting with each other. ये dolls क्यों बताए हैं? Russian dolls, if you have seen, it's a very famous example. One doll उसके अंदर another ensconced between one. We have identities like this. At the center, at the basic, at the most primary level is individual. Individual के around परिवार, परिवार के around कुटुंब, कुटुंब के around क्षेत्र अथवा भाषा, भाषा के बाहर कोई समुदाय अथवा देश और देश के ऊपर Dharma. Sanatan Dharma is always the highest principle, even greater than Desh. The concept that we have today of nation state is not, that exactly is not our concept. Our concept is Desh is a lesser entity than Sanatan Dharma. So if there is a conflict between these two identities, then it's very clear what takes priority. The identity which is higher, For example, if anything is conflict with Sanatan Dharma, then you have to abandon that duty and serve Sanatan Dharma. For example, my family, like most of our families, the instruction was खूब पढ़ो, पढ़ने का मतलब है go to IITs, go to IIMs, study a lot, earn a lot, खूब बड़ा बंगला, खूब बड़ी गाड़ी बनाओ, अगर कोई देश डिस्ट्रॉय हो रहा है उससे तुम्हें कोई मतलब नहीं होना चाहिए. Now, was it okay to listen to that family, or was it okay to defy the dictates of that family and do what you consider better here? इस situation में, when that unit itself is not serving Sanatan Dharma, it is not necessary to serve that unit. And then you are free from serving that unit, you have to serve Sanatan Dharma itself. So this is the multiple identities, they coexist. Generally there is no conflict, because if every unit is in service of Sanatan Dharma, for example, your Parvat says, of course, earn money. Earth making is a very good activity, considered very central in our culture. So make money, but also donate for social causes. Also make money in a way in which it does not violate the basic principles, the fundamental axioms of Sanatan Dharma, the fundamental axioms of our culture and society. Then listening to that parvar is actually obligatory. You have to listen to that. Generally, in a perfect situation, all of these units, if they are serving the highest principle, then they are not in conflict. But if one of them, two of them, or more than one of them stop serving Sanatan Dharma, and if there is a conflict between two, you have a very clear choice. The higher principle and the highest principle always wins. If you have any confusion, look towards the highest principle of Sanatan Dharma. Is it serving Sanatan Dharma or not? If not, then you can defy the dictate. If it is, then you have to listen to that. This is how conflicts are resolved. So ये जो identity wars हैं, जो West के बहुत deep हैं, बहुत सारी violence होती है. Currently भी जो Trump, what he is rolling back, जो gender identity, the wars that became so severe. अरे भाई, until 1942, you were forcing your scientists like Alan Turing to castrate, to self-castrate because they were homosexual. And he committed suicide after that. The trauma was so big. Until 1942, the Parliament of UK is doing this. And now they have gay pride parades where school में आके they have explicit sexual activity. So like a pendulum they swing between from one extreme to another extreme. This is what happens when you have no conflict resolution method between different identities. So one thing to remember about our great civilization, you should not be shy in having great pride in that. We had a very clear mechanism of resolving conflicts. We had a method of containing multiple identities within one person and not having any conflict with it. So this is one of the most fundamental outcome in IKS, let's say, which will happen after you learn all of this. Sorry, we missed this. Another thing is that because of karma and punarjanm, we are an experience-based society, but not a dogma-based society. Now, what is the difference? Dogma, ये book में ये लिखा है, हमारे महान मार्क्स ऐसा कह गए हैं. उसकी वैलिडिटी क्या है, इससे हमें लेना देना नहीं है. उन्होंने ये कहा है कि मेजॉरिटी अप्रेस करती है, माइनॉरिटी ऑलवेज अप्रेस होती है. And there is a boundary. I recently was on multiple boundaries. Meghalaya and Bangladesh, the boundary is so fluid. The border fence जो है, so मेघालय के पहाड़ जहाँ एंड हो रहे हैं, where the mountains hills of Meghalaya is ending, where India ends, and फिर बांग्लादेश just starts in the plains. अब those mountains are irregular. Of course, the folds ऐसे होंगे. तो fence तो they have done irregular. अभी road that they have, the border road that they have built is not, it cannot be that irregular. So what happens is that कई जगह वो boundary बीच में gate खोलते हैं and you emerge out. तो मैं ऐसा वीडियो बना रहा था and we are going जैसे this is the fence, border fence, that's Bangladesh, and between India and Bangladesh कई जगह we have eliminated zero no man's land. So this is the fence. We are driving, suddenly a gate opens up and I am through and oh, am I in Bangladesh? And you are actually, it's open border because right there what you see around is Bangladesh. You are in neutral territory still because वो map पे that place is India. But you can just walk to Bangladesh. If you try to, of course the BSF will shoot, but you can in principle. So border हमारे borderlands ऐसे हैं. अब I'm sorry I missed where this anecdote came from, but dogma based society क्या करती है कि there is a book and you have to follow those rules and it has to be enshrined. मार्क्स हैं या कोई और आइडियोलॉजी है, कोई और विचारधारा है, whether it is contextual or not is not seen. Whether those rules were created in conditions of desert and you are following it in a rainforest does not matter. You have to do it because it is ordained. You cannot adapt because that is going against the text. If your instinct is in any conflict, run towards the book, whatever book, then that is a sign of a dogma-based society. But if your instinct is, let's ask the wise men, what do they say? If you go to your grandmother's generation, what was their natural instinct? Most of them were illiterate in Sanskrit. In most of our families, what did they do? ज्ञानी बाबा से पूछते हैं, पुजारी जी से पूछते हैं, पंडित जी से पूछते हैं, या generally the roaming mendicants. So we are an experience based society. Because जो कर्म और पुनर्जन्म का जो सिद्धांत है, मोक्ष की जो अवधारणा है, we have said that it is only a matter of experience, it is not a matter of expressing in language. So you only have to experience it, and experience, nobody else can do that for you, only you have to do it yourself. There is a very famous bhajan from where I come from, उदासीन भजन कहते हैं उसको, कुमार गंधर्व, you would have heard about him, very famous singer. उदासीन सेक्ट बोलते हैं उसको, and there is a very famous भजन, उड़ जाएगा हंस अकेला. वो हाँ किसका आगे क्या है, जगदर्शन का मिला. So there is a line in that, गुरु की करनी गुरु जाएगा, चेले की करनी चेला. Now that's such a deep concept at such a folk लोक level कि गुरु भी शिष्य के कर्म मिटा नहीं सकता, उसको सही पथ दिखा सकता है, उसके लिए उस पथ पर चल नहीं सकता. Not even a guru can eliminate the karmic effects of his shishya. He can show him how you can nullify them, how you can go out of those bonds, but he cannot do it for you. और जो dogma based society है, where you have to follow certain 4 or 5 dogmas and everything is good and bad according to that. So we are not a dogma based society. If your first instinct is to run towards the book, no. Your first instinct should be, what do the wise men say and what is my experience regarding that. Now experience can be wrong if you are talking about very basic experience gained through very lower apparatus. हम जो जिस स्तर पर रहते हैं generally, हमारे experience तो बहुत कुछ और होंगे. They might be very different. That's why we look towards whom? Those jnanis, those jivan mokts, those rishis who have had the highest of experience. So experience of what? Experience तो किसी का भी हो सकता है. But experience those who have raised the ladders and states of consciousness, those who have gone to higher level, हम उनकी सुनेंगे. So that's a basic feature of our society. Incidentally, that's also the core of some of the greatest schools of Indology that is working. SNB, the school of SN Balgangadhar, also talks on traditional societies work on experience, while dogmatic societies work on dogma. So for example, ये commandments हैं, ये follow करना है, this is how you have to create society. This is normativity. There is a word you would have heard, normativity. Now, Indic society does not have any such word, because we gather experience, based on that experience we create our texts. Bharat Gupji, the scholar of Natya Shastra, he says a beautiful thing. He says, लक्षण पहले आते हैं, लक्षण ग्रंथ बाद में आता है. So first there is expression of a certain kind in society, then you create the grantha. So for example, he says this about Natya Shastra. They say, when did Natya start in India? When did drama start in India? So they date it generally to the dating of Natya Shastra. But he says that's absurd, because Natya Shastra is a record of already existing and very mature practices. It is not a text which created the practice, it is the practices which created the text. So that is our society. We are guided by our practices and then we create the text. That's why we are able to adapt, that's why we are able to evolve. But कुछ भी होगा ऐसा नहीं है. What are the fundamental principles? उनको ध्यान में रखते हुए context और sustainability को, what is sustainable, what is contextual, by keeping the fundamental axioms in your mind, this is how you edit and evolve your tradition. And then we have a self-regulated society. See, our state after 1947, for at least 4 decades was non-functional in most of the parts of India. I come from parts where state कुछ नहीं होता था. We had our own armies even. मतलब we say it proudly, you might feel it bad, but हमारे चंबल में तो हमारे मतलब सबकी जातियों की आर्मी होती थी बढ़िया. भदौरिया के अलग, शर्मा जी के अलग, हमारे कायस्तों के अलग, सबकी आर्मी थी, स्टेट विस्टेट कुछ नहीं आता, और हम वी यूज टू गो टू दोज बाहुबलीज, रीजनल बाहुबली, स्टेट एग्जिस्ट ही नहीं करता था। स्टिल देयर वॉज एन इंटरनल ऑर्डर, ये जनरल ऑर्डर के अलावा भी देयर वॉज एन इंटरनल ऑर्डर, पीपल लार्जली डिड नॉट लूट ईच अदर, did not swindle each other. There was a basic order in society which kept governing by itself despite the state not functioning. ये order होना, state भी हाँ, state के लिए हमारे पास बहुत thought है, there is deep thought on how good state should be, and I am not arguing for not having a good state. State should be good, state should be very vigilant, but even then our society is self-regulated. In most of the matters it is self-regulated. One difference between that and between their society and us, when you do not have a self-regulated society, when you already have order which is created by a police state. For example, in the US also, whenever the hurricanes strike, what is the general scene there? लूटपाट होने लगती है, एक दूसरे को आसपास पड़ोसी ही करने लगते हैं, एंड आई एम नॉट मेकिंग ब्लैंकेट स्टेटमेंट, सारे ऐसे नहीं होते, ऑफ कोर्स देयर आर वेरी गुड पीपल हु ट्राई टू हेल्प, ऑफ कोर्स देयर आर बैड पीपल, हमारे यहाँ भी देयर आर बैड पीपल हु ट्राई टू स्विंडल, बट लार्जली आर ऑर्डर, इफ देयर इज अ फमीन, इफ देयर इज अ अर्थक्वेक इन इंडिया, अभी वो बदल भी रहा है, सो ऑफ कोर्स ऑल बैड इफेक्ट्स आर ऑल्सो कमिंग हियर, बट इन जनरल आर सोसाइटी सेल्फ ऑर्गेनाइजेस, सेल्फ रेगुलेट्स. जैसे जब आई रिमेंबर द भुज अर्थक्वेक, गुजरात अर्थक्वेक, एंड आई रिमेंबर हमारे यहाँ उस समय देयर वाज नो इंटरनेट एंड ऑल, कॉमन गर्ल्स 16-18 ईयर्स ओल्ड, दे सेड, जब भूकंप आया, पापा हमें वहाँ छोड़ाओ एक महीने के लिए, हम रोटी बनाएंगे, हम खाना बनाएंगे. एंड मैनी पीपल फ्रॉम ऑल ओवर आर प्लेसेस, दे जस्ट वॉलंटियर्ड, वेंट देयर, लिव्ड देयर, दे जस्ट कुक फूड, एंड नोबडी, नो गवर्नमेंट टोल्ड देम, they did not even take money or the facilities of the government, they just went there and did on this own. This is the beauty of a self-regulated society. Our society largely is self-regulated, but there will come some times when there is an external enemy who is very organized, very determined, very centralized. Only a self-regulated society. Why this picture also? Because this flock of birds, how they organize themselves, such a beautiful principle in science, very common, most of you would know, कि कैसे वो, there is no communication of course. When they turn, actually all the birds turn, and only in a certain way. Only by knowing their local reality around them. 3-4 birds का क्या direction है, उससे वो मुड़ते हैं, and yet the entire flock remains a group and keeps turning. This is how Hindu society, Indic society is. But what if a militant opponent, very centralized, organized, dangerous, militant and violent comes? Then a centralized order for that emergency, for that certain period of time emerges to control and face that emergency danger. What is the sign? We all witnessed that very recently, which is where I'll end. This is the Kumbh, and 60 crore is what they say, but let us, 60 crore footfall hai, even if 30 to 35 crore went there, it means that at least 1 in 3 Hindus were there, which means on an average almost every family had a participation in Kumbh, almost every family. Now that's a figure which is not just a figure, which is so mind-boggling that it defies imagination. That ये कहा जाता है, Hindu society is perpetually divided. It can never unite. It can never get together. And yet, there is a spectacle where temporarily, when Kumbh Mela comes, they are able to unite in such large number, 30 crores. The second largest gathering is Hajj, which is 75 lakh, not even a crore. So we operate on entirely different scales, order of magnitude larger and greater. And the ability, and Kumbh Mela is not, if you go there now, what is left there? Nothing. Not even the signs. So, this ability of Sanatan Dharma to throw up institutions when they are needed, Kumbh Mela is the greatest symbol of that. This is just one symbol, but the ability of our society to organize, centralize and face organized threats whenever the time so comes is also a central principle. Kumbh Mela is the greatest example. Another beauty of this, there is a geographical analogy to this also. When Ganga in Yamuna, every 12 years when this Mahakumbh at Prayag is organized, actually, that's also the year when there is a natural lessening of water in those two rivers, and they naturally present more land than usual, so that you can put up camp there. And after the Kumbh Mela is done, what happens? When the next spate comes, that land is once again, a lot of that land is once again occupied by water. Abhi to water is very less, or it's controlled by dams, so it's not that perfect. But earlier it used to happen, entire land that was vacated by the rivers would be again taken by the river. So a geographical analogy of how an institution appears out of nowhere when it's needed and disappears into nowhere, lay bhi hota hai, apne aap hota hai when that emergency is over. And this is how Hindu society, that's where the question of unity and diversity comes. The unity that is sourced in these fundamental principles of Sanatana Dharma, that unity is not destructive of diversity, that is actually nourishing of diversity. Because it also has the principle of dissolution, it also has the principle of lay. These are the fundamental ideas about our culture, about Sanatana Dharma, about Bharatvarsh, about Vedic Sanskrit culture. When you go around exploring IKS, when you go around working in IKS, when you go around creating institutions, ideas, subjects, disciplines, papers in IKS, if you keep this in mind, this will keep you nearer to the core. Thank you very much. This is what it is. Thank you.